So this is an important thing we want to ask ourselves. So what are angels in terms of the purpose they fulfill in the divine wisdom? So that's what we want to do. That's what we want to understand. So God, we would say, created the angels to give subsistence or independent finite existence to the very divine thoughts that were contained in him from all eternity in this more unified and simple way in the person of the Word. So God has his infinite self-image within himself. That's the person of the Son. We talked about that when we talked about the Trinity. But within that self-image, within the Son, within the Logos of God, you have the propensity for that one thought of God to manifest himself finitely in multiple different modes. Finite modes, finite reflections of the one divine Logos. And in these finite reflections of the divine Logos, they serve as the exemplary causes of all things that exist. But what we would say, and Louis Boyer is a wonderful theologian who gets at the heart of this, and John Henry Newman as well, he talks about this as well, how the angels are, in a way, these divine thoughts of God, given a finite and individual subsistence. So that's one way in which to get at what angels really are in relationship to the divine wisdom. So these subsistent thoughts of God, these personalized ideas of God, St. Maximus the Confessor has this concept of the thought wills, or the logi of the one Logos, as thought wills, as thoughts of God ordered toward volitional activity. And the angels kind of give richness to this idea in the finite order. Because the angels are, again, these thoughts of God given a finite and individual subsistence of their own. That's very different from the material creation, because the material creation, we're going to talk about in a minute how the material creation is itself a reflection of these angelic thoughts, which are reflections of the divine thoughts, which are themselves one with the one Logos. But the angels, they, as subsistent thoughts of God, are going to then serve as mediums through which the ideas of God, the exemplary causes of God, are going to be reflected further into the material creation. So the material cosmos, the whole order of the material cosmos, are in a way images of a finite image, a finite immaterial subsistent image of the infinite image of God. I hope you can see where I'm going with that. And so this helps bring about a very harmonious unity of all creation from the divine perspective. And this gets at the heart of what their role is in the material world, in the material order of things.
Anonymous sent $3. What makes an essence remain an essence? Love?
Well, thank you for the $3, Anonymous. I would say it's God's love. God's love is essentially what imbues in an essence a capacity to remain itself, because that capacity is received in a thing by virtue of its existence. Existence is what gives a thing capability to persist in being. But existence is always borrowed. It's borrowed as a result of God's loving will to impart a borrowed existence to that thing. And so, yes, I would say love is the answer to that. Okay, so getting back to this relationship between angels and the material cosmos. The material cosmos, while it is, of course, created directly by God, we would maintain that, of course, that the material cosmos is created directly by God. So the angels aren't creators of the world. I'm not claiming that, and Boyer isn't claiming that, and Newman isn't claiming that, and no Eastern Father or Western Father ever claimed that. But what we would say is that while it is directly willed by God, through the mediation of the angels, the world is nevertheless best understood as, and I'm going to use Newman's phraseology here, as skirts of angelic garments, or waving robes of those who see the face of God. And so this gives a quasi-sacramental understanding of matter vis-a-vis its relationship to the invisible world. The material creation is, I think, to use a good analogy here, and I've written it down. Well, there are two analogies that we can use. One of them has a reference in the book of Job, and it's also echoed in the prologue of the Silmarillion as well by Tolkien, which is a really good way that this is expressed, really good aesthetic way that it's expressed. So I would say you kind of understand this relationship between the angels and their mediating effect in shaping and governing and bringing to full development the material order of creation through two analogies. One of those is through music, one of those is through light. And the music example is what you find in the book of Job, where when God questions Job, he's getting at the fact that he wasn't there to see when the morning stars were there to sing this grand divine chorus. And that the morning stars are, of course, references to the angels. And so the angels, in terms of their relationship to creation, they are given this, you could say, divine sheet music. Okay? The whole development of the material cosmos is in the mind of God as, you could say, sheet music. And it was the angel's role, it's the angel's responsibility to play that music in harmony with the divine conductor. And so you're supposed to have this divine symphony play out by way of the mediation of angelic instruments. And this results in this divine cosmic symphony, and that is supposed to bring about the ultimate harmony of the whole cosmos through angelic mediation. Another analogy, and we'll get back to that example in relationship to the demons, because they are quite relevant to that analogy in terms of introducing musical dissonance into the symphony and how God can foresee that and nevertheless bring out harmony even in spite of that dissonance. But let's get to the other analogy here. The other analogy would be like how a diversity of colors emerge from a white light as through a prism. So the white light we can think of as the divine light, the divine being. The divine being is one and simple and perfect in itself, not diversified in himself, except by way of the Trinity persons, but it's a different kind of diversity. But when that white light shines through a prism, what happens? You get the full array of different colors. You get the rainbow. You get the full spectrum of visible light. And the angels kind of serve the role of that prism. So white light has within itself, you could say, exemplary causes of the multitude of colors. And of course, God didn't need any kind of angelic prism, but because he is super eminently generous, and he wants to, out of his love, bestow on creation a share in his own divine causality, he's nevertheless going to bestow upon the angels a share in his causality to govern the world and to shape the unfolding of material creation to actually ultimately reach what God had in mind from the very beginning. Okay. So the angels serve this role as the prism. When light hits the prism, it diversifies into a beautiful array of multiple colors. And so the angels fulfill that prisming role in the unfolding of material creation. Okay, so that gets at what their relationship is to the material cosmos. And that's going to be very important to remember when we talk about their fall and why their fall has such a dramatic impact on the evil in the world. So, they're created. And this gets to Clayton's question. Are they created with the beatific vision? Are they created with knowledge of God as he is in himself? And the answer to that is no. Emphatically no. So, but we would say, and the tradition agrees with me here, St. Thomas agrees with me, and most of the tradition would say that they are created in grace. So just like man was created in grace, but not created with the beatific vision, not created with knowledge of the divine himself. But they are created in grace. They're created in this state of supernatural elevation to behold the vision of God. So they're created in this state of sanctifying grace. And so what then determines their destiny? Well, we would say, given the nature of angelic activity, we would say that it's their first instant, their first deliberative act in relationship or in response to that state of sanctifying grace. That's what we would say. So why is it their first, and why do they only have one? Because that is what we would say. We would say that their first deliberate act of the will is in itself what determined for the rest of eternity their relationship to God. Okay. So why do they only get one chance? And why is it their first action? Well, it's because of how angelic knowing and willing works. So because the angels are entirely detached from matter in their activity, in their substantial activity, before they engage in an act, they know instantly all of the possible implications that flow from that action. They know them perfectly. Why? Because they're not tied down in matter. And so they see with the perfect clarity of intellectual vision what follows from their decisions. And so when they act on that knowledge, they act perfectly with an incapability to change their mind because of the perfection of their knowledge. And so their first act of the will in response to this grace that they're given is going to determine where they end up for the rest of eternity, because it's going to be done with such a perfection of knowledge and will. And so for that reason, when they're given this grace, if they choose against the cooperation of that grace, then they reject the source of that grace in a way that is wholly absolute and therefore not subject to the possibility of repentance. Similarly, if the angel chooses to act in harmony with that grace that they are given, then that is likewise, that act of cooperation with grace is done with such perfect knowledge and will that it cannot be revoked. And for that reason, they instantly receive the beatific vision. God instantly and freely, yes, because it's grace, bestows upon them the vision of his infinite love, of his infinite being and of his infinite perfections and of his infinite love.